This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook, and we're at the 2019 BioCeuticals Research Symposium. We're here with Marcus Blackmore and Strang from BioCeuticals. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Hi.
Now, we're on to a contentious issue. Well, something, it's not tinged with emotion, it's fueled with emotion. It feels like, once again, naturopathy and integrative medicine is under attack. But is this a recent issue, Marcus?
No, it's been there forever. And I've dealt with it all my life, and my father before me, and I can remember 1955, I was only 10 years old, when the British Medical Association, which was the forerunner of the AMA, tried to stop my father particularly practising in Queensland. And it was really an interesting time. They did that through changes in the Medical Acts. What they underestimated with my father, and I think this is the core of where we get in the natural medicine space, where we get our support. We get our support from patients. We get our support from the public because they get the results. We don't necessarily get so much support from practitioners because one of the problems is our practitioners start pinching patients. So, I remember my father had a practice right next door to Lady Salento, an amazing woman and a wonderful, wonderful friend of mine. And she wrote a column in the Courier Mail in Queensland called The Medical Mother. And at one stage, the AMA threatened to deregister her, and she was in her 80s then. She just said, go for your life. And they weren't game to take her on. She was so popular. But she and her husband had a medical practice right next door to my father in Wharf Street, Brisbane. My old man used to say, they go in there, they don't get fixed, they come in here, son. So that sort of thing's been going on forever. We've got obviously a fairly pressing situation with the medical board and also the government with the rebates at the moment.
But I guess we're here at the 2019 Symposium. We've got Professor Dale Bredesen, we've got Brandon Brock, we've got Jay Lombard, we've got Amanda Archibald here. We've got doctors who are practicing supportive medicine and realising that, at least in cognitive decline, there is nothing in medicine that works. And so they're looking to help their patients for more. So there's this groundswell that's happening to elicit change. We're seeing that. There's a UTS event we've just been speaking about before. So why is there such reticence when there are no answers, when there are pitfalls, when there are shortfalls in existing therapy? Why is there such reticence?
It's all and good saying there are no answers, but of course orthodox medicine says we do have the answers. We say, but there are alternatives that might be a better answer. A classic example is, like St John's wort. We know that St John's wort in clinical trials is as effective as Prozac. Maybe not in really severe depression, but in most cases of depression, it works just as well with no side effects. So why wouldn't a doctor prescribe St John's wort? Well, the first reason is it's very expensive. And whereas if he prescribed the Prozac, they might get it for next to nothing through Medicare. So
that's not the real cost, because we charge that. Yeah. That's what the patient doesn't get charged the cost, but the cost to the Australian community is greater.
That's right. Well, not only that, when the patient buys our product, the St John's wort, they pay GST. So I'm forever trying to tell politicians, we as an industry are revenue positive to them. The pharma industry costs them $8 billion a year to subsidise drugs. So that's one thing. The other thing is this. Let me tell you a little story. I was in Fiji the other day with my wife at a small resort, and a guy and his wife walk in the night before we were leaving. And I said, what do you do, mate? He said, I'm an orthopaedic surgeon. I said, oh, wow. And he said, what do you do? And I told him. And he said, well, a lot of my patients take your glucosamine and your fish oil. Then he said to me, and he nearly floored me, he said, is there any evidence for it? I mean, we got so much evidence. And then he said to me, and he was being serious, what's an integrative medicine practitioner? Then we got onto a discussion about how long it takes to be an orthopaedic surgeon. 10 years. 6 years of medicine, 2 years in the country working with other orthopaedic surgeons, then another 2 years working with this guy who is very senior in the profession to get their fellowship.
Yep.
Now tell me this, in 10 years, how many lectures would you have attended on nutrition? None.
No.
Not one. So therefore, what we do in society is we take the elite from our secondary school system, we send them to an elitist medical school, and then we teach them nothing about the fuel that we put in the body. So it's not unreasonable for them to turn around and say, if there was any value in it, we would have been taught at our elite school. So that's the underlying problem, I think.
My question to that would be, let's say with osteoarthritis, what's the number one treatment that we should be instigating is loss of weight, or the control of weight. How do you do that without looking at nutrition? But Di, just to ask you to go back a little bit, because you've had some experience in the profession. So what sort of challenges have you seen facing the profession over the years?
Well, that's a really interesting. Obviously, government. These issues with government is an issue for us. There's also the issue of research and being able to have sufficient credibility to get a seat at the healthcare table. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Marcus personally and Blackmores and BioCeuticals invest so much money in research, because we really need to have a credible seat at the table so that we are seen as a viable and credible treatment opportunity.
So you put a lot of money into research, and then of course you get called out for it, saying that it's
look, everybody has a go at it. Can you believe this? My wife and I gave $10 million to Southern Cross University to establish the Centre for Naturopathic Medicine, because my father on his deathbed said, the sad thing in my life was I didn't see naturopathy as a profession, and I've sort of taken that on now that I can afford to do it and support that sort of activity. So the critics came out of the woodwork. It was difficult for them to criticise a $10 million donation, so they criticised the university and said, it's only, I don't know what the terminology used, like a backyard university. I rang Adam Shoemaker, the Vice-Chancellor. He said, I'm not even going to acknowledge them. He said, it'll only put fuel on the fire. They can go and do what they want to do. And so, we've just got this element of critics largely associated with the Friends of Science and Medicine, and they just spend most of their time criticising complementary medicine. Don't ask me why. Maybe, I've always thought, I was in the army for a while. I've always thought that you should engage your enemy, then one of two things will happen. You'll either convince them that you're right and they should think about it, but at least if you can't do that, you might understand your enemy a bit better. So I invited one of these guys to come out to Blackmores and see what we do and talk to our scientific people and the research we're doing. You know what he did? Within a day, he sends a letter out to all the media. I'll be giving a lecture at Blackmores next week and you're all invited. I knew nothing about it. Nothing. So they've got some interesting tactics. Anyway.
But we'll
always have critics, of course we will.
But it must be frustrating when, you put in a substantial amount of work into research that can't be owned by you, like a drug company. For instance, something that costs Australia a heck of a lot of money in skin cancer. And Blackmore support skin cancers, non-melanoma skin cancers.
I think I've got a couple here.
Blackmore's put in a substantial amount of money to research a nutrient that can't be owned by you. You don't have a patent on vitamin B3, like a drug company can patent an antihypertensive or Viagra. So how frustrating is that when you put in this research? Like, what's the underpinning reason then?
It's frustrating in a sense, but it is what it is. When you compare the pharma model, and let me say this, the pharma model started in 1940 with the discovery of cortisone, and a little bit before that antibiotics. And it developed a whole new industry. And it changed the face of medicine, it changed the face of pharmacy, because before that they did use herbal products and things. So this was a much easier thing to do. All you had to do was get very focused on the diagnosis, and then you had a MIMS, and that'd tell you what drug to use. So it sort of simplified things. On the other hand, as you rightly observed, in our space we can't get that patentability because we're dealing in natural products. But it is what it is. What we've done, hopefully we've got a situation with our government in Australia now that when we put in an application to register a product, we in Australia, almost uniquely in the world, we have to justify the claim. We have to hold the evidence for that. So what we're now saying is it might require us a lot of work to do that. What about giving us, if you like, a patent on the claim? And there's a fairly positive response from government at the moment that we would get an exclusivity on the claim for 3 years. Now, it's not as good as the pharma guys. They get 20 years of exclusivity on their product. That's why they're singularly and spectacularly just about the most successful business on the planet.
Yeah, particularly I think it's important that when a drug comes out, and I'm going to take Viagra as an example. I'm not going to take Viagra. I'm going to use Viagra. The faux pas, Beck. I know. I'm going to talk about Viagra as an example, and that is that when those drugs come out, initially they're extremely high cost, and then the price goes down over a period of years. I mean, I think it was it $80 for 1 or 2 Viagra? What was it? No.
It was 2. I don't know.
But interestingly, I guess where I wanted to head with this was there is no such IP for nutritional medicine. For instance, BioCeuticals sponsored some research, and I'm quite proud of this with BioCeuticals, that it wasn't a BioCeuticals product. It was what the researcher wanted to research on, and BioCeuticals provided those raw materials, correct?
I just want to talk to, this is Blackmores and BioCeuticals. So one of the things that's really important for us is in our business there are lots of practitioners. There are naturopaths, nurses, dietitians, herbalists, TCM practitioners, and so part of our mandate, this is not just business for us. This is personal. One of the things that makes me, and I've worked for Blackmores since God was a boy, for a long time, and one of the things that makes me really proud about working in this group is we really walk the walk. We invest in research for our industry and our profession that doesn't necessarily have a direct return of investment for us as a business. And there are not many businesses or industries where people do that and companies do that. And Marcus leads that, but he puts his hand in his pocket for research from his own foundation, his own money, and that is a really, for all of us, for our industry, for our profession, because it's not something that we just do for many of us. It's something we've called to. So we're called to. So we have this sense of obligation for all of us. And I know that might sound a bit cheesy, but it's real.
It's actually true.
It's really, where
it's
a lot
all
of
for naught unless somebody gets well.
Yes, but actually that's the end game, isn't it? Not necessarily just to make us money. The end game is to help people get well and help people understand what they can do to be proactive and preventative with healthcare issues.
Look, we live in the wellness business. I think if you were going to start off in business today and you wanted to find something to invest in or you wanted to participate in, the wellness business is pretty obvious. The reality is the more successful we get, the more people that engage themselves or get involved in our industry, the bigger it will get. The bigger it gets, the more money we can allocate to research. And it is what it is. We can do the research on. BioCeuticals doing a major project now with the lady from the Endeavour College and Charlie Teo on cannabis and its use in pain for brain cancer and
glioblastoma,
stuff.
yeah.
You know, they won't be able to patent that product per se, but it'll make a very significant contribution to Charlie Teo and his work, I think. So you just do those things, you know. It's the way it is. You know, I'd love to have a patent on vitamin C or something.
For sepsis.
It's not reality.
Di, you alluded to it. Marcus, you've spoken about it a couple of times. And that is that you've got the research monies, and then you've also got the charity monies. You do a lot with your charities. So how do you... I mean, obviously the research is more, you know, nutrient type based. But what sort of things do you do with your charities, and how do you differentiate the two?
Well, look, we do a multitude of things of a charitable nature. I think the whole corporate world has an obligation, particularly to people less fortunate than we are. And I tell you, so we did a beautiful thing. I was in Bangkok the other day, and our office staff knitted these gloves. And I thought, what are they for? And they were for people that had, like, I don't know what you call it, like paralysis in their hands or something, in hospitals.
Right.
And so the staff knitted these gloves, then went off to the hospital and gave it to... I thought that was a really meaningful thing for our staff to get involved in. We run the Sydney Running Festival, and we encourage charities to participate and raise money for the charity. You know what, did I give you a beautiful story? The guy that's the managing director of our Asian business, Peter Osborne, is a Buddhist, and he supports a monastery in Bhutan. And he wrote this lovely story about why he does that. And I looked at it and I thought, gee, that's, you know, it's a really beautiful story. If it's all right, Peter, can I share it with all the staff? He said, oh, yes, fine, that's okay. And then we've got 1,400 staff. So I said to the staff, if we all put in $5 each, we'll get $7,000. My wife and I will double that.
Yep.
We'll match that. So we'll get $14,000. And Peter was really excited. I mean, that was the ambition. Well, I think we're up to, the staff have contributed $16,000, and I'm mugging up that I've got to put in $16,000. So we're going to end up with $32,000. Peter is over the moon. He's going to build like a monastery for the nuns in Bhutan.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we get involved in those sort of things. Outside of that, you know, we've been long-time supporters of Charlie Teo, and not just in his research, but supporting his foundation. Whatever.
United in Compassion, Mind, there's a lot.
We support the local surf club.
And the Aboriginal work that you've done.
The what?
The work with the Aboriginals that you've done, Australian Indigenous peoples.
Well, we've done a number of things with the Aboriginal community. We sponsored a project with Southern Cross University where they've got the Ginniby College for Aboriginal people, because the elders were worried about, in northern New South Wales, were worried about the loss of Aboriginal herbal medicine.
Ah, right. Okay.
And so we sponsored that for. I don't think it really went anywhere. One of the challenges dealing with Aboriginal people is, you can understand they get very protective. It's like a witch doctor sort of thing, and that's their tools of trade. And they're not going to go and share those with all the white honkies that turn up tomorrow. And
it's not
let me tell you another
good track record.
Let me tell you another good story. I did a job for the Australian Defence Force, and on the board that I was part of was a guy by the name of Tom Calmer, an Aboriginal man who is the Chancellor of Canberra University. Tom's a wonderful man, and he's there's only ever been 2 or 3 Aboriginal people that have been Chancellors of universities, so highly regarded. And I said to Tom, and I could talk to him like this, I shouldn't say it, but I said, now listen, Tom, you black fellas, I said, you've been around here for a long time. You've been into spiritual medicine for thousands of years. I said, us white honkies, we're only just getting into it. You know, if you did meditation 20 years ago, people would want to lock you up. They think you've lost your marbles or something, you know. So I said to him, what a shame, Tom, that when us white honkies came here, that we didn't sit down with you guys and say, what can you teach us and what could we teach you? And then we might have avoided all the confrontation or something. But what a wonderful man he is, you know, just to see.
Di, anything to say?
Look, I just had, I recently had a personal example of charity, and it was a simple one. The boys at my kids were collecting.
Yes.
They were, you know this story. They were collecting small toiletries to make packs for the homeless. So I just said to a lot of the people in our business, if you're travelling, can you collect some stuff for me? And it was, and this really it didn't cost anybody any money, but it did cost them some time and attention. And out of the woodwork came lots of stuff. And there are even some people bribing housekeeping, Andrew Whitfield Cook, to get me more stuff. And so we ended up with this great big box of things to make for the homeless. And it was just, I don't know, there is an example of, in our business, people just really care about other people, about making them well, about people that are less fortunate. There's a real spirit. I think there's a real sense of trying to make a difference.
I'd prefer to consider that a charitable donation by that hotel that ended up housekeeping, but anyway, thank you. Marcus Blackmore, Di Strang, there is so much more that we could talk about, but we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on the FX Medicine stage today. This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook.
I had to tell that story.